Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Becoming a Snake Charmer, Introduction to Python. Thank you for everyone for joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, KP Maye. He is the scholarly engagement librarian for the social sciences and data at Tulane University. He will be teaching us all about getting started with Python today. So thank you so much. And KP, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for this workshop. I am going to share my screen as well. Let's see. Yes. So here we go. So once again, thank you for joining me today for an introduction to Python. I know that learning how to code and learning more about the technical skills related to librarianship and information science can kind of be intimidating. So give yourself a pat on the back for joining us today. I am going to reiterate some of the things that were said earlier. My name is KP Maye. I am the scholarly engagement librarian for social sciences and data at Tulane University. And I provide services mostly to students and faculty members working in social science or social work, sociology, economics, education. And then I also do a little data work. So this workshop that you're going to see today is very similar to the type of programming I do at Tulane. I have some information here about my alma maters. I'm a graduate of Ole Miss and the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And I'm also a graduate of Super Smash Brothers. I play it so much, I know all about it. So I think it's very cool to share the things that I do outside of work. So if you're a Smash Bros fan, hello. So these are the things we're going to be talking about today. Of course, you do not have to jot all this information down. You don't have to commit it to memory. I'm going to be sharing a couple of resources with you today that'll have this information. But you're going to be essentially learning some of the fundamental elements of programming in Python. I learned Python programming by using an app on my phone, and I just got so addicted. I thought I had to teach other people. So I'm also going to talk to you today about how you can continue your learning journey as you begin your work in Python. Just a couple of notes before we get started. So cameras are not needed, but feel free to turn them on. It will be cool to see some faces. Just know that if you turn on your camera, I'll probably call on you a lot to affirm things. So you're sacrificing yourself here. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. You can message me directly if you have a question and you don't feel comfortable bringing it to the group. I tend to talk quickly. I am from Chicago. I am a city boy living in New Orleans. So if I am speaking too quickly, just ask me to repeat myself. That doesn't bother me. Also, I would love for you all to have the most fun you can out of the workshop. All of the material that you see today, you will be receiving links for. So if you want to just view the workshop and take in the information through audio, feel free to do so because you'll be able to go back and visit the information later. But if you want to play around with the files that I share with you as I'm going through the workshop, feel free to do that as well. And of course, have fun because you should always have fun. So here is a little information I'm going to share with you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. So I am going to share with you the link to a workshop guide. This guide is going to be your BFF. Let me go ahead and get this. Let me see. Oh, I'm seeing the affirming comments in the chat. Thank you. Thank you. So I just shared a beautiful link to a Google site that has all of the information I'm going to share with you today. Can someone give me a thumbs? It says it's an error. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else getting an error? Yep. All right, let's go in and make some changes. This is no big deal. All right, folks. I think, let's see. All right. Oh, you blocked Google Docs. Okay, so this is interesting because the same thing happened with Google with when I did this workshop for CETLs. So I actually have a very similar guide that I created for the university that I'm going to share with you. It has the exact same content. So we have run into a technical issue that I can address. So let's see. Oh, healthcare doesn't like Google. That is good to know. Thank y'all. Thank y'all for that. Good, good, good. So the guide that I just shared with you is a guide from Tulane. So it is going to go over essentially all of the things we're going to talk about today. And this is good context too about Google. I don't work in healthcare at all. So it is good to know that this is the sort of environment that you all are in. That may change some things moving forward. But I think I can get us up to speed with some additional files. So that's another thing that you'll learn when you start to code, is that you should make your files available in multiple formats, not just one, because some of these proprietary things are not accessible for everyone. So I'm going to give you that guide to start us out. And then the other thing that I'm going to share with you is the actual Google file that we code in Google Colab. But since Google is blocked for you all, I'm going to just display my screen and show you this functionality. And then what I'm going to do is go back and give you a very similar file that you can render on your computer. Is anyone having issues opening the Google Colab file? The second link. It works for you? Okay. No? Colab. Okay, so Colab works, but Google Docs is not working. Can I get a thumbs up if that's the right impression? Good. Thank you. Thank you. Yay. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to move forward like this. So let's go back to the presentation. All right, cool. So like I said, moving forward, we'll be using that guide from Tulane that I'll link to since you can't access that website. And then we'll be using the Google Colab file. But to get us back on track, I want to make sure we have a general understanding of what Python is. So Python is a programming language that is used for creating apps, analyzing data, machine learning, creating algorithms. And so you can really use Python for a variety of different data-intensive tasks. So learning it is going to open up a wide world for you. However, I do want to let you know that Python is not the only way that you can analyze data. And this is important to tell people because sometimes the technical aspect of Python can be kind of daunting. So you can use other programming languages like R or Java to do some of the things that you see today. But you can also use a tool like Tableau or Excel or Power BI to do these same things. So once you're getting started with Python, if you're like, wow, I don't really have the space in my life to carve out the time to learn Python, just know that there are other ways that you can analyze data. And feel free to reach out to me. I also do a little coding in R, and I have experience in Tableau, Excel, and Power BI. So if you have questions about those tools, I'm going to share my contact information after this as well. So when we're interacting with Python, do you prefer Python over the other methods? I prefer Python over the other methods, the question in the chat, because it's quicker to do things in Python. So if I want to like change the, let's say if I wanted added a comma to a column in a spreadsheet, I can easily do that in Python with just one line of code versus having to like open so many windows to get to the thing that I want to get to. Python it allows you to do so many things in one window. Is R built on Python? No. So R is, I'm not sure about the history of R, exactly, Douglas, but Python is built on C++, and R may be built on C++ as well. That I'm not sure about. Let me see. People who know R are often very obsessed with it. Yes, it really is. People who know R love R. They do everything in R. I just don't think R is pretty. I'm sorry. I like Python. So I'm a little biased there. But I also do a lot of machine learning, and my machine learning courses were taught in Python and not R. So that environment is just different. A lot of biostatisticians work in R. A lot of ecologists work in R because there are a lot of packages already created for you to do the kind of statistical processing that you would do. Yes, thank you, Jessica. So when we're interacting with Python, we have multiple options. We can interact with Python through our terminal or our console on our system, or we can use a IDE, so integrated development environment. So Google Colab is going to be the IDE that we use today. The reason why I prefer to teach and to use IDEs over terminals is because IDEs have a lot of syntactical nuances that you don't get in the terminal or in the console. For example, there's going to be some highlighting and some legends that pop up when you hover over things in an IDE that will not pop up in your terminal or your console because your system is not programmed in the same way that that IDE is programmed. So you'll see a lot more coloring indication for variable types. You'll see a lot more, like I said, legends for different types of methods and functions if you use an IDE versus using a console. So IDE is integrated development environment. So I will type that here as well. Integrated development environment. All right. Beautiful, beautiful. So you can interact with Python in multiple IDEs. So when I am doing, like if I'm creating charts and graphs, I use Jupyter usually. Jupyter is a IDE environment that you can use. I use it mostly for, like I said, creating visualizations and things to do quickly. If I'm going to do some kind of in-depth machine learning, I'm going to use Spider. And Spider is an app that you can download onto your system, just like these other IDEs, where you can run your code. Spider has a lot more blocking functionality, so you can create code blocks that run at one time and do a lot more intense annotation versus Jupyter, which is very like straight to the point, which you'll see actually Google Colab is built on Jupyter. So once we work in Google Colab, you can kind of say you have a little bit of knowledge about how Jupyter Notebook looks as an environment. And just think about it like your integrated development environment is like your notebook, and then coding is just the language that you're putting in that notebook. So going. Now, the cool thing about learning Python or learning any programming language like R is that you have the ability to what I call create visual agility. So when you're working with data, most of the times we're working with spreadsheets, right? So what we see on the top, we also work with images here at Tulane. So you may see a data set of images. What a programming language allows you to do is to store that large data into something small known as a variable. And so now, instead of you being in Excel and having to look at a large Excel sheet and scroll through all the columns and all the rows, you can just refer to your variable, in this example known as DF. And that variable is going to store all the information for you. So instead of, like I said, being on something like Excel where you have to look at an entire sheet, Python gives you the ability to create this visual agility so that your eyes can focus in on the analysis you're doing, and you don't have to keep looking at the data itself because that can get distracting. Okay, so now we're going to get into the coding. So I'm going to stop share again and then bring this back up. So now I'm going to reshare. All right. How is this looking for everyone? Is this large enough? Should I increase the size? Beautiful. Thank you, Christina. Yes. Great audience today. I wish I had snacks to give you. Right? So getting started, this is going to be the integrated development environment that we use for this coding workshop. Go Google Colab. Google Colab is free to those who have a Google account. It is, like I said, built on Jupyter Notebook. So some of the same things you'll see in terms of the different colors that the words turn or how these different blocks are set up in the notebook are very similar to what you'll see if you use Jupyter Notebook. So before we get started, I have three things to tell you really. The first one is that at the beginning, I'll be going kind of slow. But then over time, I'll speed up a little bit because my expectation is that you'll get used to the syntax and the word arrangement that you see, that you'll be able to say, okay, KP, I can kind of tell what this is. So if I do start going too fast, eventually, please let me know. Now, the next two things I want to tell you are some key terminology that we'll be using today that you'll hear me refer to. The first is going to be variable. So a variable is just a named data or a name given to some data that is stored in memory in Python. I guess that's the more appropriate technical way to explain it. So you'll see me assign some data to variables, and this is known as variable assignment. So essentially what you're going to see is different types of data being stored in these names that we create. And then the system is going to tell us what kind of data that is. So if you're in this file, go ahead and make a copy so that you're not making any edits on the original file. But I don't think you're going to be typing anything new, so you can just press play here. So what you're seeing first is some text. So Google Colab allows you to enter text, and it also allows you to enter code. This is another good thing about an IDE, because if you're just coding on your terminal, you're going to have to do some extra code to establish the fact that this is text. Versus in an IDE, they give you the ability to create text automatically. So I've created some text here, and then here I have a bit of code. So what you're seeing is this word integer. This is my variable. So this is a name that I'm giving to some data. And when I set that variable equal to a number like 8, you'll see that the number turns green. Well, this is the benefit, like I said, of an IDE. You're seeing that this green coloring means that that is an integer value. So the first thing, integer equals 8, is me storing that number 8 in that word. And then when I use this function known as print, and I'll talk a bit about print later and what functions are, but print is going to print out what is stored in that variable. And then this function type is going to tell me what type of variable it is. So you're going to see the same sort of syntax for the next couple of blocks, because I'm showing you the different types of data you can store in Python. So the first one here is an integer. So we are going to press play, and you already saw what happened. But this is going to say, okay, I'm going to print out 8 like it says here. But then I'm also going to tell you what type of integer or what type of value this is. This is an integer. Okay. Everybody good on that? You kind of see what's happening? Good. The next one is going to be a float. So floats are also number values, but floats have decimals. So I can't use, I will show you this. I can't use this word float. You see it turns blue because float is a keyword in Python. So that's why you see I have float 1. So if a word is a keyword in Python, you can't use it as a variable name, and it'll change colors if it's a keyword. So you see here like type, it changed colors, right? So I'm saying float 1 equals 2.3. I print out float 1, and then I get the type, and it's a float. Okay. The next one we have is string. So I do a lot of string and text processing. So I love string data. I love textual data. So if you want to store string data, let me see. Can y'all hear me all right? Okay, it's saying that my speaker isn't working, but it is. Okay. Let me see. Perfect. So if we want to store string data, you would establish the string data in quotations here. So you see I have Tulane University, so string equals quotations Tulane. You can use double quote or single quote to establish text data, but they just have to match. So I can't use a single quote and then a double quote. It would have to be 2 of the same thing. And then if I do that same process, I print it out and I ask what type it is. I'm going to get Tulane University, and I'm going to get string. Okay. So we've talked about integers, which are whole numbers. We've talked about floats, which are decimals. And then we talked about string. So these are like the basic types of data that you can store in Python. And can y'all put in the chat if you're working primarily in your work with text data or numeric data? You can just put in one or the other in chat. Kind of want to get a sense of that. All right. Cool. Numeric. Okay, both. Okay. A lot of both, which I like. I like some text. All right, cool. So next we're going to talk about Boolean. So the Boolean type of data is a binary data type where you can establish whether or not something is true or false. So if I said here Boolean equal true, and then I print out Boolean and I print out the type as well, I'm going to get true bool. So false is the other one that can go here. So if I were to take this out and put false, as you see, then run this again, it's going to print out, but then it's going to establish false instead of true. So you get to see that. All right. Boolean operators are mostly used whenever people are doing like test runs on data. So they may write some code and say, if Boolean equals true, then this is a test run. And so they'll just test it out on one thing, and then they'll be like Boolean equals false, and then they'll run the entire code. So it's a good way to like manage the workflow of your code. All right, and then same thing. All right, now let's get into our compound or our dynamic data types. The first is going to be a list. So a list is pretty self-explanatory. It is a collection of objects stored as one variable. So here I have list one equals, and then pay attention to the symboling here. So I have brackets. So brackets are how you establish a list. And I have green wave is one of my objects in that list. And then I have 1834 and then 30.5. So if I were to print out this list, it's going to give me all of those values because that is only one thing. Okay. So you use list when you're storing multiple values as one object. And you can change lists, so you can add and remove things from lists. And I do have these notes here in the text that says syntax. So pay attention to the syntax because that is going to tell you how to establish these variables. I know in other programming languages, you have to go through like a different process of establishing the type of variable, but in Python, it automatically guesses the variable for you. So I'm seeing some things in the chat. So similar to if then on Excel. Yes. So it's very similar to if then. We're actually going to talk about if then as a process as well, because you can establish some if and coding in Python. Okay. Why does the print show? Okay. Yeah. So why does the print function also print the type of variable? That's because I did the type under. That's why I show them both. All right, cool. Is there a way that print can show it visually in a table? Yes, it just depends on the type of data stored. So if you have a data frame, which is the Python equivalent to like an Excel sheet or a CSV file, it will print as a table in that way. But the data itself would have to be a table for it to print as a table. Or you can reorganize it and then have it print as a table, which is a little bit more complicated. All right. So any questions on the list? Variable? No. All right. Keep all questions coming. All right. So the next compound dynamic type we're going to talk about is a dictionary. So dictionaries are cool because they establish a key attribute relationship. So dictionaries, you could think of them as like Excel sheets because they have like a column name and then they have data in the column or data in the rows, right? So we can say, okay, in this dictionary, we want to store information about Kimberly. So we have her name, which is going to be the key, and then the attribute or the value is Kimberly. So then we have her age is 22. This looks very similar to JavaScript. And then we have her status is undergraduate. So this type is called a dictionary because it takes a value and it tells you what that value means in a certain instance. Okay. If we were to print this dictionary, you'll see the curly braces. And then if we were to look at type dictionary, we're going to get the type. It's a dictionary. So remember, if you're ever unsure about what type of data something is, if you just type in type and then the variable name, you're going to get that data type out instantly. Okay, list dictionaries. Oh, things can be added to dictionaries as well, and things can be removed and changed. That's important to remember. All right, the next thing we have is a set. So a set of items is it's almost like a list. It's established like a dictionary. So you use these like curly brackets. But when you have a set, you can't modify it. So you can add new items to a set, but you can't take anything out necessarily. So when you're establishing a set, some people will establish a set instead of a list when their data is going through multiple processes that may affect the list and they don't want any changes to happen to it. So they'll set it as a set instead. So it just really depends on what type of data you have and what you want done to it. Also, things can't, if I'm not mistaken, repeat in a set. And I want to double check that because someone at another workshop said that they could, and I was not able to check it. So let's do that. No, perfect. So yes, as you're seeing, things cannot repeat in a set. So sets are also good if you have, if you're like, okay, this is a list of things and I only want the unique objects in that list, you can change it from a list to a set. And then that set will only have one instance of everything. So that works. So you're seeing like you have these data types that are very similar, but the way that you can change them or what things can go in them all really are going to be what separates them from each other. So it all depends on your data task as to which one you're going to use. So the next kind of compound dynamic type we have is a tuple. Let's see. Why does the set read from last to first when displaying? You know, I have no idea. I've never even thought, and you know, to be honest, I've never used a set. I've never done a process where I had to use one. But I don't know. You know what? We will, how about Lynn, let's look into it. You gotta let us know. You gotta let us know. All right. Community learning, we love it. All right, so the next set, like I was saying, is the tuple. So a tuple can't be changed and no new items can be added. So whereas in a set, you can add a new item, you can't change anything. In a tuple, you can't really do anything to it. And I'm pretty sure things can repeat in tuples, but to be sure, like as you can tell, I don't use tuples a lot either. Let's double check that. Yes, so things can repeat in a tuple, unlike in a set. But you can't add anything to a tuple, or you can add things to a set. So what you're seeing here is like Python is trying to get very specific. And so they're not only thinking what type of data you're using, but what are you going to do with the data in these large dynamic data types. Okay, and then we see type tuple. Now, the last type we're going to talk about, if you can't add anything to it, why did it let you? Oh, because when I added 1834, I added it to the original set, but I couldn't like say this set plus another, or this tuple plus another tuple and add them together. So I can go and change the original one, but if I were trying to combine that tuple with another tuple, I wouldn't be able to do that. Does that make sense, Caitlin? Yeah, good, wonderful, thank you. All right, so you can merge tuples, but you can't merge tuples, but can merge sets. Yeah, unless the things in the two sets are the same, then it will merge them, but it will make sure only one copy of that is in there. And then how is a tuple different than a list? Because you can add things to list. You can add things to tuples. So yeah. I will tell you, I primarily use lists because the things I'm doing don't involve that. But it really, and that's the cool thing about Python is you may be saying like, okay, I have this list of things, but then I only want to get the unique values in it. So then set it as a tuple, but then you may want to set it back to a list later, right? So it really just depends on the processes you're using. It's going to determine the type of thing that you use. So a tuple is different than a list because in a list you can add things, in a tuple you cannot. And the major difference is going to be between the set and the tuple, where you can't add things. You can add new items to a set, but you can't add new items to a tuple. That's that major difference there. Okay, yeah. So the main difference, and no need to apologize. We're learning, people. So the main difference between a list and a set is that you can add things to lists, you can change a list, you can add two lists together. But in a set, and you can have things repeat in a list, but in a set, nothing can repeat. Or if things repeat, when you print it out, it's going to only print out one instance of the thing that you have repeating. But in a list, you can have multiple things repeating if you want to. And then thank you for that, Douglas. I created that brand new set. That's how the difference was said. And also, if you feel like this is a lot of information at one time, it's because it is. And you'll probably have to work on some kind of project on your own to really get like the nuances. But I think you all are in a good spot to really take this and do something with it in your practice. So the last data type that we're going to talk about is the data type that you're probably clamoring to get to eventually. And it's the data frame. So a data frame is like a CSV file. And you import and manipulate data frames with a library that's called pandas. So Python is a collection of technical specificities around a coding language, right? Well, then pandas is a library, which means it takes those specificities and it has functions based on Python that you can use. So instead of you having to create your own operations on the data, pandas has operations that you can use. So what you're going to see here is I'm going to import this library known as pandas, and I'm giving it a nickname. So whenever you're importing a library, and you'll learn about this a little bit later, You want to give it a nickname because when you refer to something that's inside of that library, you have to refer to the name of it. So here, what I said is, okay, I have this variable, this thing that I want called data frame. And what I'm going to do is go in the pandas library, and I'm going to use this function. And we'll talk about functions, like I said, a little bit later. You've already seen one function in play, which is print. So this is telling the system, okay, go and retrieve this CSV file, and I want you to import it into this environment for me. So when I do the type of data, or I got to run this first. When I do type here, you're going to see that it says pandas core frame data frame, because that's a type that is in pandas. So we had to get into that library to be able to, in order to create a file like this. Is the housing CSV file available on the LibGuide? So cool thing, the housing CSV file is actually available through Colab. So Colab, if you go here on the left where it says files and sample data, it's already up there for you. So once you run that, it should run automatically. Colab does have a couple of tutorials too using this data. So if you want to go and check those things out as well, you can. And this is their data sets in Colab are wonderful data sets to practice on. So please keep that in mind. But thank you for that question, Douglas. So now what you're seeing is the data frame, and it says head next to it. So these are known as methods. I'll tell you about methods later too. But I did at least want to give you a preview of what you're building up to. So we started out with just storing numbers and words and lists of things. But eventually you're going to be able to store an entire CSV file just like you stored those things, right? So this is the type of work you're headed to. Colab also has this little button, this magical wand, where if you press it, it gives you a cute little table that you can download. So for those of you who are like, I like my things to look very CSV file-like, Colab allows you to do that. And you can download this data as it appears here as well. So I just ran you through like 6 data types in Python. How is everyone feeling? Is everyone okay? Did we learn something? Good. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. I see some heads nodding. That's a good sign. Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne, for the thumbs up. All right. So next, we're going to talk about things that we can do to operate on these variables. So once we have variables established, the first like basic operations that I want to make sure you learned is, yes, Astita, listen, sometimes I have to go back and rewatch things. Like, I get it. But the variable operators are going to allow you to do processes and operations on math variables or numeric variables, and then some textual variables. So what you're seeing here is when I press play, what I have done is I've said, okay, the word 5, I'm going to store the number 5 in it, like we did earlier. The number 6, I'm going to store the number 6 in it, like we did earlier with variable assignment. So we're learning some things. Now, I'm going to teach you these operators, which allow you to do math on these variables. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just adding things. So if we want to add things together, we can just use the plus sign. So what you're seeing me is I'm printing out this mathematical operation. So we have addition, we have multiplication, we have division, and we have subtraction. So the other two that you see are going to be modular operations. So the first one is our modular division. So what you're getting for 5 with the percent sign 6 is going to be the remainder of what 5 divided by 6 is. And sometimes that's important in math operations. I have not come into a math situation where I needed to just use the remainder, but there's some processes where people need the remainder as a specific number. And then the last one is an exponent. So I'm just saying 5 to the 6th power is what. So these basic math operations you can perform on your variables if they are numeric. So let's look at the chat. Okay, yes, thank you for sharing those files, Maria. All right, Christopher, to import a file, do you have to import it into the interface first, or can you link it? Good question, Chris. So you can link it from your computer, you can link it from being imported, and you can link it from your Google Drive. The only thing is, since you're operating on an online server, you'll have to mount your computer's drive to this server. And there's some code that I can send you for that. I don't have it with me now, but eventually I can get it to you. And then if you want to use Google Drive, if you have a file there, you can mount the Google Drive to this server in particular. The only thing is you'll have to like remount the file every time. And the same thing here. If the file doesn't live in Google, you're going to have to upload the file each time you run this code and then close it out. So that's another thing about Colab. And then why space with the, I don't know why I put the space there, to be honest, Lynn. I was probably trying to rush to complete this, but it doesn't do anything different. Remainder, yes. Thank you, Carly. That is a good use for that modular division, is when you want to know if something is even or odd. Good. All right. Now let's take a look at doing the same thing with text values. So you can use two operations on text values. You can either do a multiplication. So if I have the name Jorge, and I store it as name, and then I multiply by 4, I'm going to get Jorge 4 times. So Jorge, 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 Jorge. A space is a character usually. So it's really good that you brought that up earlier about the space character, because if I were to put a space after Jorge, then it would have the space then. So spaces are very important in Python. They're a character in themselves. So remember that. Now, if I have two names that I want to join together, I can use the same thing. So you're seeing name plus name2 after I've stored Jason as name2. And if I print that out, it's going to give me Jorge plus Jason is what you're going to see. Let me see. If I put a space after Jason, you'll see it should be more space. Yeah, you're going to get rid of the space between them. So if I get rid of this, if I have no space between them, like this, if I space between them, yeah, this is what it was supposed to do. I don't know why I was doing what it was doing earlier, but boom. You would have to put this space in order for Jason and Jorge to be separated here as well. So remember that. Space is a character. Or just to throw you for another little loop, you can put the space here and it should space it out for you. So, and like I said, remember, space is a character itself. All right, let me see. I will remember SAS. Yeah, exactly, Chris, exactly. Spaces are important as characters, but now operations. Yes, because the space is important when it's in the quotation marks, because spaces are text, essentially. That's how the system is reading it. Or space after Jorge or before Jason. Exactly. It's like I can go in, let me get rid of this space. I'm geeking out about the text data, I know. But I can go and put the space bar before, or the space before Jason, and it'll do the same thing. So yeah. Cool. And that's another thing that's cool about Python, is you can do the same thing in 20,000 ways and no one is wrong, as long as you get the job done. So next, let's talk about assignment variables. So assignment variables are very similar to or assignment operators are very similar to our usual operators, except that they assign or store the value back into our original variable. So you see here, I said x equals 5. And so if I say x plus equal 5, that means I'm adding 5 to my original 5, and the equal sign will store the new number, which is 10, back into the original x. So if I run this and I go here, you'll see once I print out x the first time, it says 10. And then if I do the same thing here, where I say x equals 5 and then x minus equal 2, and then I print out x, you'll see that I get 3, because now x has been updated. So it has assigned that new value back to the original variable. This is good whenever you're running some kind of loop and you're trying to keep count of things. So you're like, keep adding 1 to the number 1 until it reaches 10. And once it reaches 10, then the code can stop. So that's why you'll see this come up in some code a lot. So once again, you'll see the same thing with multiplication and then division. We're always going to be changing the original variable, because remember, the variable that you're storing is a name in memory. So it's going to be there perpetually until you change it. So if we were just to say x minus 4, and then just do that, it would not make x something new. It's just going to operate on it. It's not going to restore. So you have to make sure you use the equal sign to store it back into the variable if you want to change it. Okay. Now, how are we feeling about operators? Everybody good? Okay, Christina, thank you, thank you. All right. Okay, so far, right. And remember, you can access this file at any time. It is not private. It will not be private after this workshop. The next set of things we're going to talk about are methods. Can you repeat that again? Oh, assignment operators. Yeah. So on assignment operators, what you're doing is you're doing some sort of operation on a variable, like here with x equals 5. I'm telling the system, okay, I want you to take x and multiply by 3. But when I add this additional equal sign next to my operator, it's also going to update the original variable. So now it says x equals 5, and then x multiply equal 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. So now x is going to equal 15 instead of 5. Does that make sense, Percy? Wonderful. Thank you for the questions. All right. So now let's get into some of the magic of Python. Let's start changing some things. So methods are special functions, special operators that can be used on certain variables. So every method that you see will be attached to a variable by a period and some arguments. So you'll see this here. So whenever we use a method, we're going to append that method to the back of the variable that we want it to operate on. So this is like using functions in Excel, very similar kind of concept. So what is the thing that I want to happen to this variable? And then let me attach it to it. So we're going to talk about some list methods. So the first one we're going to talk about is appending something to a list. So remember, a list is a collection of things separated by commas. And we have a list of pronouns here. So in my original list, I had list 1 equals you, me, us, and we. Now, if I use this method known as append, you see here, you see we have list 1, and then attached to it, we have the thing that we want done. And then I can append a new word, such as them. Let's say, so if we run this, you're going to see them is appended. I'm actually going to comment this out. When you comment something out with a pound key, it's going to make sure that it doesn't run as code, it's only text. So I do want to show you what this looked like originally. So you don't see the them in the original one, but once we add that line of code back, you'll see that them has been appended. So this is one way to add something to a list. So let's see. So methods are related to what you can do with type. Exactly, Christina. So you can use certain methods on certain variables. So you can't use append on a numeric variable. You can only use it on a list. Yep. Any questions about this? Because I think once, like I said, once we get this syntax, I think we're going to be able to breeze through some of this. All right. So the next one is going to be removing something from a list. So there are multiple ways to remove something from a list. The first way that I'm going to talk about is a way that's going to also introduce another concept in Python known as indexing. So whenever you have things in a list in Python, the list is organized or given a unique number to refer to the position in that list. This is also true for columns and other things that are compound variables. So for example, I have a list that starts with the word you, ends with the word we, some more pronouns. And I have this method known as pop. Now pop does what it sounds like it does. It gets rid of something. It's going to remove something. So pop is going to take a number or the index number of the thing you want to remove from the list. So follow me. So in this list, our first thing is going to be you. Okay. So we have the word you. Then we have the word me. Then we have us and we. So the position of you is known as index 0. So Python starts numbering things or indexing them at 0. So the 0 item in this list is the word you. The number 1 item in this list is the word me. The number 2 is the word us, and number 3 is we. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So to use pop, you have to know the index number of the thing you want to remove. So if we did this list and then we pop that 0 and we reprint the list, then we're going to see that U is gone. Ready? See? Okay. Cool, cool. I'll let that marinate while I address the question about functions and methods. So methods can be used on certain variable types and they are appended to a variable, but a function, the syntax is different. So with a function, you're actually going to put the name of the variable inside of the parentheses. So that's the main syntactical difference between a function and a method. And functions usually only work on one type, where methods could work on like a list and a set and a tuple, but a function may only work on something that is numeric. And technically methods are functions. It's just the way that they're stored in Python, you have to call to them differently. So when you're calling to a method, you're calling from Python's memory, essentially. When you're calling from a function, that's not always the case. There are only a couple of functions that are native in Python. A lot of the other functions are native in the other libraries that you import. And then how did you know U was 0? So does indexing start at 0? Exactly, indexing always starts at 0. And that's just the principle of Python. I want to say it's the same in other programming languages as well. So anytime you create a list or a container variable, so where we have multiple things in one variable, the first thing is always going to be 0. Because to Python, 0 is a number, right? It goes into like the computer coding, like 0 represents something. All right, does that clear up everything? We're good. Wonderful. Oh no, you can put many thousands of things in a list. The list will go up until your computer's memory or your RAM. So depending on how much processing you can do on your computer, that will determine how many things you can put in the list, but it can be thousands. If you want to refer, I will teach you this real quick. If you want to refer to the very last thing on the list, you can do -1. Say you have this long list and you're like, I know the last thing is something I don't want. If you pop -1, it'll pop the last thing. So go backwards. Let's see how that played out. Right. Wonderful. Yes, you're welcome, Jessica. So now I'm going to teach you another way to remove things from your list, which could be easier. If you know everything in your list, then you can just refer to the thing you want to remove and use the method known as remove. So if we have list1.remove we, then we're going to see that we was removed. So you use indexing if you don't know what is in your list, but you know the position it would be in, like, oh, I know we're going to remove the last thing in this list. But if you know what is in your list and things in your list don't repeat, then you can use remove. Let me see, I may be getting ahead of the training, which is fine, Lynn, gifted students. If you have a row of numbers and want to take the number of rows and divide it into a total value. So you want to take the number of rows and want to take, oh yeah, you can do that. You do that. Mm-hmm. That's possible. If you have a data frame, if that is something that you're working on, or you get to work on and you have questions about it, feel free to reach out. I can show you how to do that. All right. Now, since we're talking about index, I guess I will teach you how to find the index. And yes, Brandon, remove will take just the first instance, which is why I said if it repeats, you don't want to use remove. That's a whole different thing that's beyond the training. But yes, it's only going to take the first instance out. But we can create a function that will take out every instance, and that'd be like, of course, no problem. So if you wanted to find the index of a value in a list and you know the name of it, you can use this method known as index. You put in the name of the thing and it will give you the index. So I can easily go ahead and change this to, let's say, us, and it should give me the number 2 because that's the new index here. Can you show an example of list 1 index where you type in something that isn't in the list? Yeah, let's see. So a pronoun that's not here is she. You should get an error message. Yeah. So you'll get this. And if you ever get an error message that you don't know what it is, Once again, Python is open source language. People use it all the time. There's so many open resources. You can Google the error message, and you can find something that will help you with it. I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I still use Google for error messages. I'm like, what does this mean? All right. What if you have a repeating pronoun? I'm pretty sure it'll get the first instance. Let's check that, Kayleen. Yeah. Yeah, you're only going to get the first instance. Now you can create a loop that will loop over this list and look for each individual word by itself. But then once again, that's a little bit out of the scope of this. All right. Now let's look at this next one, counting things in a list. So let's say that we, actually, I want to take some of this away to help y'all a little bit. Perfect. So we have this new method that we can use on lists known as count. So count is going to give you the ability to count the occurrences of things in a list. So if we were to say, okay, count how many we's appear in this list, we'll get 2, because we have we back to back. Now, joining list is also an easy operation. So if I want to join 2 lists, I will establish them separately, and then I'll just use a plus sign. And when I put them together, it's going to create a new list or a new list 1. So if you don't see an output, it's probably because you have to print it yourself. So you'll see this. So I have list 1 is you, me, us, we. List 2 is Sheila, Joe, Ronald, and Jacob. And so I'm going to say, add these 2 lists together, and I want you to store it as this new variable. Because remember, if you don't store this as a variable, that's going to happen, but nothing is going to be updated. Let me see. Oh, here it is. So you see, if I print out list 1, it's still going to give me that same thing. I would have to tell the system explicitly, okay, now the new variable, or the new contents of list 1 is going to be the combination of them. Is it possible to give the new? Oh, yeah, of course. We can do list 3 and then print out list 3. Absolutely. All right. The next one is going to be sorting lists alphabetically. Easy, dot sort. Woo, all right. So if we want to sort it from me through you, we'll do dot sort on list 1, and we have a sorted list. All right. Any questions about those list methods? No? Beautiful. Okay, we're going to go through some string methods. And then there are going to be some other methods that you can use on dictionary, sort, Z to A sorting that I've never done. Colin, is it Colin or Colleen? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. But no, I have not done Z to A sorting before. I'm pretty sure it's possible. Call in, boom. Thank you for that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's possible. If you do have questions about these methods, I always tell people, and like I said earlier, I still go to Google. It's really easy. Can you sort them in numerical order with a sort? I'm pretty sure it does. Let's double check that. Yeah, there you go. It will sort numerically as well. All right. You're welcome, Jessica. All right, so let's talk about these string methods. So remember, string is text data. So there are also methods that work on those. So here I have the word string, and I say that it equals Tulane University libraries. Yes, so whenever the value, Deanna, whenever the value is numeric, you don't put quotation marks around it. Because if you put quotation marks around it, then Python is going to assume that it is a text value. Thank you for that question. So like I was saying, with string variables, you can also use some methods. So we have string 1 equals Tulane University libraries, and then we do string, actually, I'm gonna take away some of this too. I'm gonna try to get the least amount of code as possible. So if I do string dot capitalize, you're gonna see that it's gonna capitalize the first word of a string. And then we have the same thing with title. So I'm actually going to explain what you're seeing me do here. And you've seen this a couple of times already. But what I've been doing is just storing that value back into the original variable. But as you saw me do here, if you just run this operation, it'll show you what you did. It won't store it anywhere, but it will show you what happened. So when you see me do the equals or a variable and then equals in front of the method, that means I'm trying to like keep it stored somewhere. Because if not, it just is done, but it's not stored. So once again, here we have a method for another string variable known as title, and title is going to capitalize the first letter of each word. So if we press play, we get this. Yeah. Now, some of you may be wanting to change things and make them all lowercase. I always say making things lowercase in Python is easy. Not easy, but useful, because then you won't have to remember what letter did I capitalize. Just keep everything lowercase. Storing it allows you to use it in other methods, right? Exactly, Margaret, it does. It allows you to use it again. Because remember, all of this that you're running is in your computer's memory. All right, so it's like just staying there. You're welcome. So lowercase and then upper, we have the same thing for uppercase. So you can do string.upper, and if you store it and print it out, you'll see that everything is now uppercase. So these are our string methods. I think there's one more or two more actually. Oh, yes, two more. So you can also find the index of a letter. So just like with list, string values are indexed starting at 0. So the letter T is in the 0 position. The letter U is in the 1 position. The letter L is in the 2nd position. So that same functionality is in textual data. And if I were to add a space right before T, oh, I messed that up. Yeah, if I were to add a space right before T, then the index of 7 or the index of the number U will change to 8. So I'm going to show you that again. So in the first instance of this, you'll see Tulane University libraries. And then if I were to say find U, that's going to give me the index of the first occurrence. And I want you to remember that you're only looking for the first occurrence whenever you're working in Python. Now you can create things that will allow you to look at every other occurrence, but once again, outside of the scope. So here it says that the letter U is in the 7th position. And that's true because we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You get the gist. But if I were to put a space before the letter T and run this again, it's telling me that the capital U is in the 8th position, because remember in text data, the space is a character in itself. So this is a good way to find the index. Oh, Maria, thank you. I don't know if she left yet, but all right. The next thing is creating a list out of strings. So this is something that I use all the time in the work that I do. So I do a lot of text processing. So if you want to take a string of data, let's say a sentence of words, or in this example, the name of the libraries in the university, you can split the data on what's called a delimiter, and then you create a list of words. So I have string equals Tulane University libraries. If I were to say, okay, I want to have a new variable called string list, and what I want that to be is this value here split up on the spaces, then when I print it out, I'm going to get Tulane, comma, university, comma, libraries. And then to clarify, text data is case sensitive. Correct. It is very case sensitive, which is why my suggestion of making as many things lowercase as possible, so you don't get into what did I capitalize and what didn't I capitalize. Yeah, you can change the delimiter. To not be a comma. So the delimiter here is just a space, because there's a space between Tulane University and libraries. Now, I don't think you can add, like you can't change the list from commas, because in order for it to be a list, it would have to be commas. But if I had commas here, let's say, between the words, like this, then it would split it up, because it would know that, oh, those commas are there. And see, if I were to change this to a space, it may give me an error. Oh, no, it's not going to do much of anything. You see how it's just putting it together? It's not really splitting anything because there's nothing to split, because there's no spaces there. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. I'll go back to change this. And then this, and then you'll see we're now getting each individual object. All right, now the last couple of things here are going to be our dictionary methods. And I think dictionary methods are it. I do want to make sure that we get to functions before we get close to time. So I'm going to give y'all a little homework since you have access to this file. Look over the dictionary methods. They're very similar to the other methods that you saw. And so remember, the dictionary is the one that has the key value and then the attribute that it relates to. And so you're seeing here a method known as update. I'm adding something new to this dictionary. So there are other methods that you'll be able to see for dictionaries. And I want to make sure, like I said, we get to functions. So please feel free to, in your spare time, maybe the little that you have, go check this out. So the next thing is functions. So as I said before, functions and methods are like sisters, just different daddies, right? So a function can be used whenever you're trying to operate on a variable or reveal information about that variable. So the function that you saw that we use at first is going to be print. So I have name1 equals Raquel. And then I have print name1. And what you're seeing is that Raquel is being printed out. So that's a function. And the key difference between a function and a method is that a function takes the variable as an argument. It's not appended next to it. It is an actual argument within the function. So if we were to print name1, we're going to get Raquel. Now you'll see here, we have some other functions that we can work with. So I'm going to get rid of this print statement because we don't need it. And I'm going to make this simpler. So if I were to establish this list 3, as the numbers 1, 17, and 25, I can use this function known as max, and I will put in the argument, which is the variable that I'm looking at, and then it will give me that max number. So remember here, the difference between a method and a function is really the syntax. Both of them like do things to variables, but a lot of times with the function, you're just revealing something about the variable. You're not really changing it. You're just kind of like revealing information. So you can do the same thing with min. I don't need this print statement, so I'm going to remove that again. And if I want to know the minimum in that list, I'm going to get 1. How do you know which function required a print function to display? So none of them require print. Well, I take it back. Functions require print if you're going to change something inside of the variable. Same thing with methods. So if you're changing the actual thing, you may want to print it out to check it. But when you run the variable, it's not going to, like for example, it's going to print this out, but it's not going to store it anywhere. So when you saw me use print, it's because I was storing that value somewhere and then I had to print it back out. Does that make sense? So you don't have to use print, but that was just my way of saying like, oh, I stored it in this variable. I want to make sure that that variable is updated. Yes. Thank you, Margaret. So functions do not manipulate variables. No, I'm really going through all the functions I use. No, because you don't use a function to add anything. You may use it to like change the layout, but you're not really changing anything when you use a function. No, and see, like in these functions, I'm doing operations. Like I'm gonna get to this in a second, but like the power function, 7 to the power of 2 is 49. I'm not changing 7 or 2. I'm just like adding them together. So essentially, Janessa, that is correct. Functions are gonna like do things with them, but it's not gonna change the actual variable itself. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Oh, where was I? Yes, I am sharing that document. I'm gonna paste the link here one more time. For those of us viewing in the future on YouTube or online, I'm referring to the chat often. Sorry about that. All right, so once again, we see these other functions that come up like min and max. Same thing here with max. Once again, sorry about the confusion there. But if I'm looking for the max name, can anybody guess? Oh man, I kind of gave it away with the comment. It's going to give me the last name in alphabetical order. Darn. But yeah, so if you use max on text data, it's going to look at alphabetical order and give you Sheila. Versus on numerical data, it's looking at the highest number. So that's kind of intuitive. And then the same thing with min, it's going to give you that, it's going to give you the last name in alphabetical order in that list. And So, and one thing that confused me about min and max the first time is that you're not using min and max to see the first thing and the last thing in the list. Okay. It's once those things have been arranged in order, then what would be the first thing and the last thing. So keep that in mind. All right. So we can also use functions like sorted, remove this here, to sort numbers for us. So sorted num, it will give us this. I've never used sorted for a list of text. Let's see. Exactly, it's not the same as dot sort. So dot sort is a dot sort is a method, but sorted is a function, or sort is a function. And so whenever you're saying sort here, whenever you're saying like, okay, I want you to sort this list, it's not sorting it's not storing num1 as then something that is sorted. It's just doing that operation for you. Does that make sense, Jessica? And then if you were to print it, right, if you were to print it, that's because you just wanted to print, but you don't have to. So let's say if I did list 1 with numeric or textual data, remember I haven't done this one before. I'm going to see if it does the same thing. Sorted list 1. Yeah, it must be integers. Okay, so yeah, sorted doesn't work on text data. It only works on numeric data. Good to know. Perfect. All right. So if you did want to sort, wait, that's not true because it's sorting this. Let's see, y'all. Sorted. I wonder why. I don't know. Now that is interesting. So we have this list here of, I see what's happening. So we have this list here of numbers that we're able to use sorted on. And now I'm looking at this list of variables here. We put in names. Oh, I did. Yes. I think I probably had that variable wrong the first time was what it was. So what you're seeing here is actually not a list. Let's go back and change this. Double check. Perfect. So you can use sorted for names. I guess I had the wrong, as you're saying, I had the wrong thing in there. I didn't have the right variable. Thank you for pointing that out. But you can use it on string data as well. So we see numerical data being sorted and then string data being sorted. But I usually use the method sort when I'm working. And so, like I said before, there are multiple ways to do the same thing with Python, and none of them are wrong as long as the output is what you envision it to be. Now, you also saw this function earlier known as type. So if I were to say name equals 1.23 and then type name, I'm going to get float. So once again, you've been seeing this kind of thinking about how functions and methods may output things from previous discussions we've had, but this is kind of establishing the difference between a function and a method more clearly. And like I said, the major difference is that a method is going to be appended while a function is going to have an argument be the variable that's being operated on. Then you also have these other functions that come native in Python. There's some math functions. So absolute value is one of them, as well as power. And then you can do some rounding things. So if we go down to rounding, for example, I do want to explain this one because this function does take a couple of arguments. And I'm going to remove print again so that I don't confuse. Yeah. Let's see. All right. So if I were to say round here, it's going to give me this first one, right? And so when you use round, you're saying round to this number and have these many decimal places. But if I were to have no decimal places, so no comma in the number, it's just going to give me, what would it do? The default is, let me see again. The default is to go all the way, okay? Now, this is not magic. Let me reestablish this, y'all. This is not supposed to round that high. Python, you have deceived me. Let's see. Aha, there we go. So whenever you're rounding, and that's another thing to remember too, is if you have a lot of methods and functions in one cell, the system is going to catch on to the last one. So you want to get rid of them to make sure that you see it. I'm glad y'all are seeing all these things happen in real time. So when you do it, with no number after, you're just going to get the whole number. If you were to change this to say like 3 decimal places, then you're going to get 3 decimal places. So functions are taking arguments. Originally, we just saw the first argument, which is the variable they want to operate on. But remember, in a function, you can put in multiple arguments depending on what the data type is. And the thing that you want to remember with functions and arguments as well, or methods and arguments, is that methods can also take multiple arguments. They don't just have to take one. And the argument is going to control what is done or what is not done to the data. All right. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is the length of a string. Once again, we're going to remove this print statement to make it cleaner for us. So we have name equals Sheila. And then you'll see that the length of it is 7. If we were to count this, so we have S-E, S-H-E, that's 3, I-L-A, that's another 3. So that should be 6. But what I wanted to show you was the space. So now that I have this space here, it's saying that it's 7 characters long. If I were to get rid of it, it will go down to 6. So remember that space is a character. So you use the function len to get the length of a string, okay? You can also use the function len on a list. Now, when you're working with lists, the thing you want to remember is that each individual thing that comes after or before a comma is one thing, okay? So if I were to ask Python to look at this, list and tell me the length of the list, it's going to tell me 2, because there's Toyota and then there's Honda, okay? Those are 2 things that are in that list. Versus, like you saw earlier, if it's just one string, it's going to tell you each individual letter. So it's using len based on the type of data that's stored in that variable. Now, another function that we have here is going to be sum. So the reason why I printed SUMM is because I stored that in a variable. So if I were to say sum with 2 m's equals sum 1, 2, 3, 1, 5, 6, and 7, it's going to add them all up and it's going to print out what the addition would be. Is there a notation we can use to not run a part of the code in a procedure? Absolutely. So you can use what I do when I'm not trying to run a portion of the code is I just use the pound symbol in front of that line to just block it out. Wonderful. The question is, of course. So again, this is us adding those numbers. And if I were to get rid of this new variable, yes, Jessica, that makes it a comment. Exactly. If I were to get rid of this, print this, yeah, it'll still print out. Cool. So the next thing before we get to closer to like rounding everything out is going to be data type conversion. So how's everybody feeling? I see that people have gone to meetings. So we had a couple of people step out and stuff, which is totally fine. Is everybody pretty good to knock the rest of these 16 minutes out? Yeah, okay. Yes, thank you, Lisa. Wonderful. Thank you, Percy. I appreciate that. Function equals sort, but method equals sorted. Lost me a minute there. Yeah, so the names are just different. So the method, I want to say the method is sort. Let me go back and check that. That's a good question, Jeanette. Yeah, the function is sorted and the method is sort. So you can use either one. And once again, that's the thing about Python is it just really depends. Oh, I'm the best. Don't make me cry. Oh, so sweet. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so data type conversion. I'm going to actually add a little heart to that. That's really nice. All right. If you have data and you want to change the type of data, that's easy to do. So we have here IC, which is just a random variable that I created. And I stored the number 34, but I stored it as string data. I want you to remember that. What you're seeing right now is string data, okay? Because I have the quotation marks. So if I were to print, and remember y'all, we need to get rid of these print statements. So we just did print, we'll get string, okay? So if I want to change it to something else, what I will do is use a simple conversion, and it looks like this. So converting to string, so you see I have this number 34, I have type, but then if I, let me clean this up a little bit more for us to see. Never mind. I do need to add this. This is another thing I want to make sure that I clarify too, and this is probably why you saw me use so many prints, is because if you have multiple methods in a cell, it's only going to print the last one. So if I use print, it's going to print each individual one. So if I were to remove print from these and have both of these without print in front of them, it's only going to print class string. It wouldn't even print the class integer because it's only working from the latest thing in memory. So I want you to remember that. So that's why I was using a lot of prints. I made this a couple of months ago, was because I was trying to clarify that both showed up in the output. But like I was saying, if we have IC equals 34, which is a numeral, and then we look at the type, we'll see that it's an integer. If we use this method or this function here known as string str on IC, it's going to change it to a string. Does that make sense? Everyone seeing that? Okay, good. Yeah. I know this cell is kind of crowded, so I want to make sure we kind of see what's happening. So the method that we're focusing on is here, str, and we're going to put IC in it, and then store it again. It's going to make it a string. Okay. Same sort of thing here with IC34. I think I had something similar at the top. So with IC34, if we're looking at the type the first time, we're going to see that the type is string because you're seeing these quotation marks, right? If we look at IC the second time, you're going to see that it is an integer because we use int to make it an integer. So we're going back and forth with types, right? So changing data types is really easy. It's also easy to do this if you're looking at a data frame and you want to change the entire type of a column. It's also easy to do that as well. Oh, no, Python is fun, y'all. It's a good time. I'm going to tell you about an app you can use to learn a little bit more about Python. So that we're going to change a list variable or a string variable to a list. You've already seen this. So I showed you how to use split. So split is how you take a string variable and you create lists out of its words. So I'm not going to really go through that one again. Now we're getting to some libraries. So we just talked about functions and methods in data conversion. I know that data conversion went by quickly because it's really simple. You just have to do int or string or float in front of the data that you want to change, and then that will serve as your function to change that data. So I did preview this as well a little bit earlier. Whenever you want to use some things that may not be native in Python, so you're using libraries that don't exist in like the core basic Python package, you're importing libraries. In math is a library that's native in Python, so you really don't have to download it. So when you import math as MT, this gives you the ability to use functions and methods that are in math on numbers in Python. So once again, we're giving it a nickname by saying as, and what we're saying is, okay, in the library math, there is a function called square root, okay? And I want you to take the square root of 25. So what is the library? What is the function? What is the argument? That's how you access libraries and use functions and libraries. So the same thing here. I didn't import it. Let's do it. Here we go. So we have math is MT. So in MT, what is pi? Is going to tell us what that is. Same thing here. There's a function in math known as fsum. If we fsum it, then we're going to get the sum. How did you find out what? So if you have to import it or download it, then it's not native to Python. And if you go to Python's website, their documentation will tell you what's native and what's not. Well, it will tell you what's native, but it won't tell you what's not. And I will tell you this, you will probably use pandas more than anything. So just know when you're starting out learning your how to use Python, learn what is in the pandas library. And there's a YouTube video that will give you some information about that. Wonderful. Same thing here with truncate, mt.trunc, we're going to get 35.ff55555, right? So it's going to truncate it at the decimal. It's kind of what you're getting. I wonder if this takes another argument. Let me see. No, it doesn't. Okay. I thought it would maybe like you could tell it where to truncate, but I guess the decimal is just a thing. So you're only going to get that 35. The last major thing we're going to talk about is going to be, actually, I take that back. It's going to be two major things if we have a little time. But one of them is going to be creating comments. And you just saw this happen in real time as well. So in order to block out text from being run as code and only being run as text or as annotation, you're going to put a pound sign in front of it. The only thing you have to remember is that once you go to a new line, that is no longer considered as part of that annotation. So you would have to put a new pound sign in front of it to keep it that way. So just remember that. Is there a central place to find information on different libraries that are available? Central place. Maybe, Karen, when I have found the libraries that I needed, I have just Googled Python libraries to do this thing. But maybe there is a central hub. Actually, I will let me do a little research. I'm gonna take a note. I think we have everyone's email address. I'll make sure that I can find some library documentation to send y'all. Can comments be inline? Okay, Brandon, inline. I'm trying to understand. Could you unmute and kind of give me a little, like, say what you're saying? Interesting. What I'm thinking is they're probably using like some sort of latex or some sort of text HTML based annotation to do that. If I'm understanding you correctly. And in Python, you can actually you can use some HTML on some of the integrated development environments to change like how things would appear in line in superscript and subscript. Does that help?
A little bit, yeah. I've seen it like where there's a function
used to rename a data frame, or are they only for applications and models? Yeah, so when you import a data frame through like when you're importing a data frame into Python, you're using the pandas library to do so. So you can rename it in that library as well. Does that make sense, Christopher? Yes, okay, cool. Yeah. No, you create models and applications through the libraries, but then you can also make edits to the data frame through the library too. That's yeah. Yes, okay. Beautiful. Now I understand exactly what Brandon meant. So yeah, if you have like code, it's only, and you have that comment sign, you only have what's after that comment sign as what does not run. So yes, thank you for saying that. Who was that? Margaret, thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right. So now the last thing I'm gonna leave you with is a little bit more complicated. We're building on top of the things that you learned today. I'm going to teach you how to make Python read stuff for you using if statements. So let's say that you want to check some data and you want to see if one number is bigger than the other, okay? So we can use an if statement to read our numbers to determine that for us. So here we have 1 equals 1, which is easy. And then we have 2 equals 2, which is easy. So if we use this print statement, you'll see that it changes color. This is the important thing about using these integrated development environments, is that the coloring will help you out a lot. We have the word if, and then you'll see we have 2 greater than 1. So this greater than, equal to, less than sign, I go over that in that guide that I sent you. And it kind of explains that. It links to another guide that talks about if then statements. So you will use this to say this is the conditional relationship. So if 2 is greater than 1, then I want you to print out 2 is greater than 1. So if we were to run this, we're going to get 2 is greater than 1. If I were to change this and flip the numbers, I'm going to get nothing because that is not true. Okay. So when you're running if and then statements, once you set up your condition, if that is true, then you'll get the truth of it, right? Now you're probably wondering, well, what happens if my condition is not true? So then that's when we will bring in else statements. And this is actually where I'll like go over this and then end it, kind of leave you on a cliffhanger, because there's more content after this that you have access to. So if your assumption is not true, or you want to have a conditional that is the opposite of truth, you use else. So also make sure you're paying attention to this indenting. So the indentation is also very significant in Python, because you're letting the system know what to run after the other and what things are related. So if I were to say 1 equals 5 and 2 equals 2, if I print 2 is greater than 1, I will get 2 is greater than 1. If I do my else statement, I'm going to get the opposite of that. But I do have to put in what that message would be. So when you're seeing print, you're putting in that messaging for yourself. So if that's not true, I want you to print out 1 is greater than 2. So here you're seeing that 1 is greater than 2 because the variable 1, the number, or the word 1, the variable 1 has the number 5 stored in it. So if and then statements are good ways to check your data, especially if you have data that you want to, let's say like you know the conditions you want to set around the data, but you don't know if all of your data meets these conditions, you can use if then statements to separate this data out. So this is like, once again, a building block up to what you're going to see when you start putting all these things together, all these pieces together. So I'm going to leave you there. The Colab file has much more stuff. I think I'll also go into like multiple conditions and things like that. That library guide that I shared from Tulane, I do want to open that up real quick. I'm going to show you something about that. 1 second. Do I have it? Ah, here it goes. All right, can y'all still see my screen with the little snake and stuff? Okay, cool. So this guide, like I said, has all of those things that you'll see. But if you go to additional learning resources, I have some other things, some other websites that you don't need access to Tulane's database to get to. So you can look at these websites and these videos if you want to learn a little more about Python. And then I'm going to try to get that website to render the way I need it to render. And I'll see what I can do about that. And we can get that content to y'all. So let me see. The app you mentioned earlier. Yes, I'm going to get to that. Thank you, Jessica. Jessica is bringing us right back onto the slides. So let's do it. Let's see. Perfect. So let's go here. If you're interested in learning more about Python, I will say go to YouTube. Please go to YouTube. YouTube has a lot of free content. I've watched countless hours of YouTube videos about Python. The app that I refer to is called Mimo. There is a free version. I think I paid for it eventually. It was like $5. But it really got me to understand the basics of the coding language, which is what you really need to know. And then the last thing I'm going to say is you all are probably connected to some academic institutions. Please, please, please see if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, because LinkedIn Learning is content, educational content that you can use in your professional practice. You can also add it to your LinkedIn account, right? So if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, please look for Python tutorials in LinkedIn Learning. Coursera is also a great option. Yes, 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 yes. I've used Coursera for a couple of things. And then the last thing is thank y'all so much. It is 11:30. So I will let you go. If you need anything, my email address is there. Please reach out. I will be sure to email you within a timely manner. So thank y'all so much.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.